regardless of size of company or how you feel about brand in general, it's very important to start now. And in a year or two, you'll really appreciate that you did, because it's really hard to get going and say, oh, I want to start building an audience because we're behind. No, you have to do it. You have to do it now. And it takes a lot of discipline, but the payoffs are tremendous.
This is Slice and Dice, a show for B2B marketers who are looking to get inspiration from the best content available. But what is the best content? What are marketing and sales professionals really reading, watching, and listening to? In each episode of Slice and Dice, Brett McGrath highlights live data captured from the Juices platform and introduces what people are really interested in. Brett partners with an industry expert to figure out why certain content hits the mark and what we can all learn from it. Okay, let's chop it up.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Slice and Dice. Today, we're going to be exploring the top 5 highest performing content pieces for marketing professionals in the month of June on the Juice. Today's guest is Andy Binkley, founder and chief marketing officer at Tourial. Andy, welcome. How are you?
Good, man. Appreciate it, Brett. Thanks for having me, man.
Yes. So I'm excited to dig in and talk about the data and all that fun stuff, but I typically like to do this. So I was digging around LinkedIn profile and caught you on a podcast, and you were talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is ungated content. And it feels like over the last 2.5 years since I've been at the Juice, there's been this like debate over gate your content or let your content just go ungated. And I've heard both kind of sides of the story. And
Yeah.
I think gated, produce a lot of friction for the people that we're trying to reach. I'm curious, are there other friction points that we layer into our go-to-market process, like forms that we shouldn't? Maybe share your perspective before we jump in on just gated content from a Tourial perspective.
Yeah, personally, I'm always pro ungating, right? But at the same time, like, gating isn't terrible. Like, there's definitely some, a little bit of, I would say, an echo chamber on LinkedIn where it's marketers talking to marketers about how much they hate gates. So all of a sudden we have to ungate everything, when in reality, like, we're a small sliver of the entire software buying community, right? Like, MarTech is huge, but like not everyone is selling to marketers. So there's definitely an audience. There's lots of audiences out there that are, 100% okay giving up contact info. And I'm sure that'll change over time. But like, if you're selling to a niche where your target market will happily provide their contact info, like, I would do it, right? We don't do it because we sell to marketers, and we know that marketers are just like, head over heels against gating content. So we make sure that all of our stuff is ungated. But like, at the same time, it's not a binary where you just should completely change your strategy from everything's gated to everything's ungated. Like, you can evolve that over time. And the thing with gated content is like, it creates, for starters, it creates instant satisfaction, instant gratification, right? Which everybody loves that, scrolling through your feed, being able to see leads come in constantly from content is like, it's just naturally satisfying. There's definitely intent data that comes with having people fill out information, right? Creating friction is not always bad in some instances, where it's like you're actually able to understand who's really interested and who's not interested. So the gates can work in that instance, but ungating, it's kind of like with most things in society. If we don't like something or something's not working, we take an opposites approach. We take the more extreme route, which is like, okay, we should just ungate everything. And again, we like ungated because we like to take all that friction away, because we understand that there is a high threshold for marketers to, in terms of what they will actually give up their information for. And so we ungate everything, right? Because we understand that's just how our audience works. But if you do decide to completely ungate things and change your strategy, like, that does mean less data, fewer leads directly as a result of those. Ideally, I don't think there's any great solution out there, but I would love to have some sort of middle ground, right? I don't know what that is, but maybe somebody somewhere will create some sort of product or form or strategy that allows for a little bit more of a happy medium between the two. But other than that, like, friction points in the, buyer's journey, I think the ones that I see the most often are just waiting too long to follow up with customers after they do request a demo or request more information. That's a big one, right? Like, some people, we're usually on top of it. We'll reach out to people really quickly, but there's like so many industries that will wait days before they reach out to people. And, that I don't know what the exact number is or the stat, but it's a high number where if you're the first vendor to respond to an inbound or demo request, your odds of winning that deal go up tremendously. So like easy things like that could really be solved. And then another thing that actually just came to mind was like booking calendars. So like not just having a form, but like making it really easy for people to book time right away after they do submit their form, or just if your process allows for it, have the booking calendar right on your website. We've implemented that. And like, I'd say 80 or 90% of the time, if somebody fills out a form, they book time as well, because it's just that easy and it helps accelerate our sales process pretty tremendously.
I love the echo chamber on LinkedIn call out. And I also love like being really specific and saying like, we do this because this is how marketers behave and operate. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, I would imagine if someone's going to Tourial and they want to use your product, right? They're trying to remove some friction that exists. Do you find that when, future customers of Tourial that are about to be customers of Tourial come in, most of the time they're ungating their content, or are they going through the process, or do they have gated content and Tourial is maybe the first step into reducing friction? Maybe talk a little bit about that. I'm super curious.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I'd say for the most part, almost all of our customers, 80-85%, have them ungated. They have them on their website. They have them on their product pages, or they've got demo centers, or, they're sending them out with their sales team to send out during their outreach, post-demo, stuff like that. And those are all ungated. And then our customers, it varies. A lot of them do gated content, right? If they're doing like research reports, industry reports, guides, stuff like that, stuff that, historically has traditionally been, we've allowed gating to be the norm, right? And yeah, so for the most part, like people will come to us and we really encourage them to ungate them. But again, like some industries are very okay with saying, hey, if you're going to make me submit a couple pieces of information to access, a virtual version of your product and allow me to self demo, then I'm totally fine giving that up. And we've got customers that have a lot of success either gating some of their demos completely or gating them like after a certain point, right? So there's a little bit of psychology there to kind of give them a little taste of it and keep the momentum going to then add in a gate. But for the most part, I would say that we really see most of our customers keeping them ungated and just kind of letting people click through and explore their product. And they use it more as a mechanism to get them to what is the biggest gate of all, which is the demo request, right? So like kind of bridging that gap between what you do and why you do it, which is, primarily what the website is, and how you do it, right? All that middle ground between the what and the why, which is how the product works. Show me more of it in action, which pushes people to that demo request button.
So when we promote this episode on LinkedIn, we're going to pour some gasoline on that echo chamber and we'll ask the audience what their scorching hot takes are on forms so we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with an echo chamber. I think an echo chamber has a really bad stigma because of the fact that it's only used in negative context. But like, it's a good thing that LinkedIn is an echo chamber, as long as you are just aware of the information that you're consuming and who you're consuming it from and how it applies to you, if it does or if it doesn't, right? Because LinkedIn, the folks on LinkedIn they're every day, they're adding so much valuable information and content. They're sharing frameworks and their research and their thoughts. And you can't remember everything, right? So like the fact that things are repeated kind of tells you as a marketer, like, oh, this must be working, right? Like I've heard this multiple times now. And so there's reason to believe that, if these 5 or 10 creators or brands are really leaning into this strategy or philosophy or whatever, then there must be something to it, right? So sometimes, a lot of times, the echo chamber, I think, is actually a good thing.
We're pulling back layers on this episode already. Let's get into the list. Before we get into the list, I want to talk a little bit about the data. And just so anyone knows, if you're unfamiliar, if this is your first time checking out Slice and Dice, we pull the data directly from The Juice. The Juice is a content curation platform for B2B marketing and sales professionals and a distribution channel for brands who want to reach them. All the data is platform engagement data. So what this means is it's tracking the engagement actions of members on The Juice across the platform, and things that are calculated into this are book marketing, favoriting, sharing, all these things. And for today's data set, it's specifically filtered by our marketers who are on the platform. So one thing I noticed, Andy, from the top 5 lists that stood out to me was 2 of the top 5 pieces had the word guides in them. And when I see the word guide, I think a guide can be viewed as kind of a lead magnet. But when I think about the back end of the creation of guides, typically that means to me like more resources, more time, likely more investment. So I think it just depends on like your team structure and support in order to like put in the energy to build out guides. But I think if you're seeing results where you end up kind of on a top 5 list wherever it's being hosted, that's probably a good thing. So maybe share with me a little bit about like ebooks, guides, like how do you decide as just like a marketing leader whether it's worth kind of pouring in that investment to make that happen or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't think that there's really a right answer. I think most of the time, the reason people, well, for starters, the reason people decide to gate things is very much indicative on how much effort they put into it, right? So like their effort equals value, right? So the amount of effort you put in should equal that amount of value that the end viewer is going to receive. So there's lots of things to think about when it comes to like making the decision on, whether or not to like gate them or things like this. And yeah, like in terms of like the investment around the types of content and like what works, what's worth making the investment in, like, or do you create guides and ebooks? Like with reports and guides, I always look at obviously traffic and engagement and conversions. But the other thing too is like we always so often measure our content based on the top of the funnel and like the traffic that it's driving and the engagement and the conversions and is it ranking for keywords. But also like, we've got a lot of content that doesn't drive a ton of traffic, but our sales team uses it a lot or our customer success team uses it a lot. And a lot of the traffic, albeit small, is customers, right, that are consuming it or, prospects that are mid to bottom of the funnel that are consuming it, and it's helping them with their evaluation process. So figuring out the right mechanism and feedback loop to get around how your content is performing should not just be like, your Google Analytics platform. It should also be conversations with the sales team. It should also be like if sales is sending it out a lot or if CS is sending things out a lot, actually really do take a close look at the metrics, like the engagement metrics and stuff like that. Because if conversions are, probably going to be pretty low for something like that, but the engagement is high, then that kind of goes to show you that it's pretty valuable from a mid-funnel, bottom funnel, and even a post-sale perspective.
Andy is painting a really clear picture for how we should be thinking about content and the types of content across the funnel. Appreciate that. Are you ready to get into the content pieces specifically? Because I think number 5, it's going to be a piece that you recognize and are familiar with. So
Yeah.
we've got coming in at 5 from the Tourial team, 14 use cases for interactive demos across your funnel. And I'll just comment really quickly and would love your feedback on this piece since your team created it. But the one application in that list of 14 that I had not considered, but just makes so much sense is just leveraging an interactive demo and an outbound prospecting email. I feel like if you can do it in a way and package it up that's super easy for the person you're trying to reach to watch and understand the problem your product solves, the odds of that person on the other end watching and responding go up. So that stood out to me in that piece.
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely one of our biggest use cases, outside of, the marketing, the website use case. And yeah, the sales, I mean, we've gotten lots of strong visibility from the sales use case in terms of just like, it's like with anything, right? Every email for these days is pretty much the same. If it's a first touch, second touch email, they're traditionally very much the same. And we actually don't typically recommend that people start their cold emails with, hey, here's a demo, here's an interactive demo, right? Like you definitely want to kind of start off, warm them up a little bit, explain the product in a few sentences and the problems you're solving for. And, don't expect a response for, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 emails. I mean, that's completely normal, but, there's going to be some low hanging fruit that obviously respond, but the majority are definitely not. And that's whenever being able to provide them with some more concrete examples of your product, like interactive demos or videos or whatever that may be, really comes into handy and actually gets a good chunk of people to engage a lot more and really believe what you're selling, right? Because there's definitely a lack of trust in those emails that you get from folks in terms of, well, you say you solved this, but do you really, or is your platform really that easy to use? That sort of stuff. So that's where we usually tell them, like, after maybe the third or fourth email, that's where you can really start to fire off some more product specific emails that may be targeted around or maybe focused on like the interactive demos and stuff like that.
So maybe one more on this one, since it's a tutorial piece. When I read the content, to me it read like this is like a product led piece where it's like it's product marketing, but it's also content marketing. It's a mix of the two where you're teaching your audience on the different ways they should be applying demos in what they do. But then it's like, hey, by the way, we're Tourial and we can help support this, which I think is a really smart way to highlight your product. And I feel like it's a trend that's kind of going around in a really good way in B2B. Is content a key way that you're thinking about just opening up your audience's mind to the possibilities of what a product like a Tourial can do? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's content can mean so many things, right? And, it's one of those things where when people say content now, it's like, okay, well, there's 5, 6, 7 different things that you could mean when you say content. Like what we're creating right here is going to be content, and it's going to turn into 5 other different types of content. And it's really just like, it's ultimately communication, right? It's one of those things where if you're just writing content for SEO, then you shouldn't be doing it. If you're just writing content for, the sake of for product stuff, then you probably shouldn't do it. Like you need to be very thoughtful around what you create and make sure that you get the most bang for your buck or the most squeeze from the juice, right? So yeah, I mean, it's today, there's I really try and harp on. I'm seeing a big increase in people talking about like owned media, right? And like owned media is definitely, it's obviously been around forever, but now we're seeing the rise of so many content creators and brands creating their own audiences and their own communities. And it's proving to be very successful, right? And it takes a lot of time. It's harder to justify starting that, but that's where content obviously comes into play, right? You can't have that owned media and that audience without really ramping up your content efforts, right? And it's not just things that are targeted towards your product and bottom of the funnel, middle of the funnel. Like it's very much an educational approach, industry approach, just whoever your target audience is, building things and writing up things and supplying them with educational material is first and foremost the number one thing. And if you write really good stuff and you have a very genuine brand, then people will start to build a following around you. And before you know it, you'll have quite a big owned media presence. And then, from there, you can really start to capitalize on it. New products come out and you can, alert your audience about it, right? Like most owned audiences are not actual product users, but like just the value of having that is still very tremendous because of the network effect and how fast word can travel when you make big announcements like that.
love it. Coming in at number 4, they're always on this list. They create good content, is the ultimate guide to content strategy from the Market Muse team. To me, this was like having everything you need to know from a 101 perspective all the way through intermediate, all in one document. Just a good place to go. To me, if I were hiring a content marketer, I'd probably give them this document to level them up on just the different ways they should be thinking about their role. I don't know if you had any takeaways from this piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's obviously lots of content, lots of guides out there around content strategy, but this one was definitely a good one, especially how it broke out and talked about SEO pretty heavily. And I think, I did SEO for quite a while when I first started out in the marketing space, and there's a lot more to it. Like there's a lot that goes into thinking about how Google operates and the EAT optimization score. I think it's expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, right? Yeah, this is definitely something where, like, whenever I was doing SEO, I would have definitely abided and used this type of document like a Bible and kept it very close to me.
Number 3, the state of social media 2023. Business leaders weigh in on what's next by Sprout Social. There was something in this that stood out to me, and it's like we can't do an episode of this without talking about AI, but it said in this, AI isn't coming for your job. Outdated processes are. Mm-hmm. We got to talk about AI a little bit. Like, what's your take on AI? It can relate with social media and it can't, but I'd love to know how you're thinking about AI as a chief marketing officer at a growing SaaS company.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now there's a lot of hype, right? Obviously. And there's also a lot of fear for, like, individuals right now have a lot more fear around AI than the actual opportunity for what AI can do. A lot of leaders are really excited about AI because they're like, oh, let's inject this into our product. Let's optimize tons of processes. But then you've got a lot of middle managers that are a little concerned about, like, well, will AI, do this or do that or replace me? And I'm definitely on the side of, like, it's not going to just come in and take your job. Like, it's very much going to, I agree with this in terms of it's coming for outdated processes, right? And that's a good thing. Like, that is definitely something where there are a lot of outdated processes out there where we throw people at the problem, we throw people at the process. And if you're able to figure out how AI can improve that, I don't think that a lot of AI is just going to outright replace entire processes and people. I think it's going to build and it's going to enhance them, and it's going to create opportunities for people who may be spending too much time fixing bad processes on creating new, more efficient processes. And I hear it all the time, and it makes sense, but, like, the people that get replaced by AI are going to be the ones that don't adopt it and don't use it. And I mean, that's obviously true, right? Like, that's pretty easy to assume that that's going to be the case. And I'm sure it will, but AI is still new. It's hard to really formulate a true opinion on the topic just yet, and other than just, like, watch the technology that keeps popping up left and right in terms of, like, there's copy, there's copywriting AI, there's, all sorts of data AI, there's, just all sorts of it, right? And just kind of staying on top and being able to, again, sift through the noise. AI is just going to create a ton of noise right now. But once it kind of settles down, it's going to provide a tremendous amount of value for businesses and for buyers and for the consumers, right? Things are going to be easier to buy, easier to obtain. It's going to be a lot easier for buyers to do things, which is going to make them happier, which is going to drive more revenue for businesses, right? And businesses aren't just going to stop hiring people and replace them with AI. Like, if they have money, they're going to hire people for something else, right? So I think it's important to continue to fine tune your skill sets and understand how AI works and can help you in your role. And, if you do that, I think people will be in pretty good shape.
Number 2 was a little bit of a surprise for me, but I'm here for it. It was the Ultimate E-commerce Guide to Marketing Psychology by Exponia. What I liked about this, I'm not an e-commerce marketer, but I love the fact that it talked about psychology and the importance of understanding human behavior in order to get the outcomes that we want. And I think thinking about an e-com process and think about what we do when we buy new shoes or new coffee or whatever the product is online can really help us think about what we should be doing to lower barriers to connect with the people who we're trying to reach. Maybe share your thoughts a little bit on just like the foundational elements, like influence, like the psychology component. Like, how do you think about it with all these shiny bells and whistles going on in today's B2B marketing world?
Yeah, I think everybody as a marketer, as a salesperson, just or in general in their role, whatever they're doing, needs to understand psychology in and out. I mean, the human mind is absolutely complex and incredible and beautiful, but it is also predictable. And, you know, there's, you mentioned influence, right? There's that really famous book. I think it's Robert
Cialdini.
Cialdini, who talks about social proof and scarcity and all that stuff. And like, just, you know, reading that book multiple times, once a year, every other year, is going to get you to really understand the psychology principles that, like, it's written for marketers and salespeople, but it applies to everybody. It applies to, you know, probably dealing with your spouse, your kids, and just being persuasive and all those types of things. Like, it is very valuable. And I think this content covered it really well.
Number one, no surprise here. AI is in the title. People are searching for AI. So here's a hack, everyone. If you're creating content, say something about AI. People will probably come reading it. But it is 15 AI prompts to supercharge your sales and marketing teams from Copy AI. I just love the structure of this piece. I think it answers a lot of questions marketing and sales people are thinking about as they see the commentary on LinkedIn and other sources. What's your primary takeaway from a piece like this?
Yeah, I think funny you said, you know, just put AI in the title and something good will happen. I'm convinced that LinkedIn's algorithm just added a line of code to their algorithm where it's, you know, if AI in post, then, you know, add a couple points to that post. But yeah, no, I thought this was good. I'm still, you know, figuring out prompts and good ways to interact with GPT. I think when I started out, I was like, you know, inputting one prompt and hoping for the answer, but now it's evolved where it's turned into more of a conversation, right? Where it's like, if you don't get what you want back, you fine tune it and you ask for something else, because it builds on your answers continuously. And I think there's definitely some value in being able to understand that, like, it's more of a conversation, being able to build on your prompts. And yeah, there's so much that I don't even know about, like what you can do with GPT. My coworkers have a really good take on it, but I've been using it for brainstorming and just like real creative ideas. And that's been actually really helpful, because creativity is obviously very hard. And I think GPT actually does a really good job of just like throwing out a lot of random ideas from a lot of its, you know, from its database and all of its documents that it's processed. And I've come up with some creative ideas around different things that I've actually used and just kind of tweaked based off of its responses. So you can get real creative with it, and it does a pretty good job.
Share those on LinkedIn and package them up, because I think I'm interested in the creative prompts and how other marketers are using it. A few rapid fire here and we'll get out of here. Was there anything about this data set of these content pieces that surprised you at all?
I mean, 1, 2, 3, and 4 didn't really surprise me. I was pretty surprised that, you know, we were number 5 on there but I think what was interesting about how we made it on there was because like interactive demos are like very novel, right? And they're kind of like, people are still trying to figure it out, learn about them. How do they work? What are they best for? So that was kind of, I think, like the novelty of the idea. I think that's what really helped there. And yeah, I think, like, you know, guides are always going to perform really well. And I thought that they were really well structured, really well crafted. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where the amount of value that you can extract from a piece of content, I do think can be somewhat correlated, if not directly correlated, to the amount of effort that you put into it. And you can tell that there was a lot of effort put into these just based off length and stats and all the different types of content that was in there. And I think that's what draws people in.
Totally. And I think a lot of marketers are measured on meetings and demos. And right now they might not be hitting them. So everyone's searching for help, and you all have a product that helps solve that. So it's a good spot if you're creating content. I'm curious, just maybe in thinking about your piece or any of the other pieces, are there any opportunities that you see that exist with content that made the list? Like, are you actively doing anything with that list of 14? Is there any other creative ideas your team is working on? Maybe share some more there.
Yeah, I mean, what I found to be interesting, I don't know how many it was, but I still see, and I mean, this is fine, honestly, but like I still see a lot of PDFs. Like I still see PDFs being the predominant format for guides and reports. And I think it's because people really emphasize branding with these types of reports. They usually bring in either like a freelance graphic designer or in-house to make these reports really stand out. It's almost like creating a microsite. So I find that to be really interesting that, to be honest, that these PDFs are still getting tremendous amounts of visibility. I personally am not big on PDFs. I prefer everything to be in the HTML, CSS format on a website, crawlable by Google. I know Google can, I think, crawl PDFs, but like they certainly don't like have a preference for them just because of their mobile experience. So I found that to be the most interesting. And my thought process is just kind of like, if anything is created in PDF format, it should have a mirror replica HTML web page version, just even if it's for the SEO and for the mobile experience. And there's so many benefits to having it in just like the HTML format as opposed to the PDF. I'd say that's my takeaway and piece of advice.
Maybe before we completely bring this home, final, outside of just putting AI in the headline of every blog post that you write, is there anything else that you, based on what you've learned here or what you're thinking, that you'd leave any marketers with based on this conversation that they should be thinking about as they move forward and build out content?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take it back to the owned media, a little tidbit of owned media that we were talking about earlier. It's a really challenging thing to do. It does take effort, but you do have to start at some point. And I think the brands that capitalize on owned media and building their audience the most are going to be the ones that win. The companies, I can't remember what book I was reading, but it's the companies with the brands that sell the biggest, that IPO the biggest, that raise the most capital. Because it's really hard to put a price on brand, and the value of it is just tremendous. And so it's the companies that have huge brands, big brands, valuable brands with, large owned audiences that perform the best overall. So I think, regardless of size of company or how you feel about, brand in general, it's very important to keep that in mind and, start now. And in a year or two, you'll really appreciate that you did, because it's really hard to get going and say, oh, I want to start building an audience because we're behind. No, you have to do it. You have to do it now. And it takes a lot of discipline, but the payoffs are tremendous.
He is Andy Binkley, Chief Marketing Officer at Tourial. Love what they're doing. Andy, thank you so much. And thank you to our good friends at Motion for helping us put Slice and Dice together. We'll have to do this again soon. Take care.
Yep. Appreciate it, Brett. Thanks.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Slice and Dice. The data referenced in the show is powered by The Juice. Start searching the world's largest library of sales and marketing resources by signing up for free at thejuicehq.com. And this show is produced by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. To learn how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, visit motionagency.io.